feeling good. She Willers. Our scripture lesson this morning comes from the Revelations, and we're talking about Revelation in our Bible study now, and we're moving into that. Revelations 1 through 3. This morning is our passage. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to the bondservant the things which must be taken place. And he sent and communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John, who testified to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy, and heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near. One of the most perplexing books in all of the Bible is the book of Revelation. What makes it so difficult to read and to understand is the fact of the symbolism and the mental pictures that were familiar to the people at that particular time. They're not as familiar to us in this time, in ancient time, and especially in America, where we have a little persecution. Although we think the greatest persecution we get is the IRS or something like that. It's not our death. But the fact is, there's very little persecution. But these people knew what persecution was in the 1st and 2nd century. Then, then, God speaks. God speaks to us, and He continues to send His message of hope. Even in the most difficult of situations, God sends His message of hope. John had been imprisoned on Patmos, an island of Patmos. Well, what stands here, and he kept the faith even there. He sought God there, and God spoke to him there. On the other hand, well, I read to you something that's a little different from what we normally hear. And that is, God did not speak to him. Jesus did not speak to him. But an angel carried the message to him. We kind of fail to realize that. And angels, God's messenger is of the angels. We read about them quite often in Genesis, that is. We see them in different forms. Sometimes a messenger is a person like came to Abraham, or two people that came to Abraham. Sometimes it's that angel is whatever was leading the children of Israel. It talks about in Exodus 23:20, behold, I am going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. That's very interesting. Since the very time, from our earliest years, what have we always been taught? That we communicate directly through Christ to God. It's to our mediator. That's what we believe. And we've held to that. And it's true. There's no question about it. But there were at that time and people who believed that God was so far away and so holy that you could not speak to him directly. Now you say, can you show that in the Bible? Yes, you can. Acts 7:5. It says there, you who received the law as ordained by angels. The laws that were given to the children of Israel were not through Moses, but through angels. Delivered by angels. Now, Paul even believed that to a point. I don't know how much he believed that and how he believed it, but if you go to Galatians 4:19, it says, why the law then? It was added because of transgressions having been ordained through angels by the agency of a mediator. until the seed would come to whom the promise had been made. But if you read Exodus 19 and 20, there are no angels delivering that message. That is at a period long after, where they began to believe that God is so far away. Some people did. That you just can't, you can't get to him. As I said, an angel means, if you translate it, means messenger. And a messenger, Moses could have very easily been a messenger. I don't think that's what he's talking about there, but he was a messenger. In a sense, he was an angel. I don't think, like I said, I don't think that's what he was saying there, but if ever in this world we needed, most recently, we need a mediator. We need somebody to step forward and say, I will lead, or that can lead the people. The times are ripe for the Lord. But the Lord has, there's been suffering going on forever. Actually, the children of Israel believed that the Messiah would come. But eventually they stopped believing that the Messiah would come as a man from the lineage of David, because they didn't expect any human to be able to do it. It was going to take an intervention, God coming into the world, and we call that the day of the Lord. He's going to come in, and he's going to change events. He's going to step on the stage of history and change everything. Because it is so evil. Times are so bad. He's going to blast it away. And then there would be this time now, the time in between, and the glorious time to come in the future. Whatever those timelines are, is what Revelation and other books, Daniel, and talk about. Because between the Old Testament and the New Testament, there was a lot of literature called apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature is literature about the end of time. We talked about this in the Bible study the other night. Basically, the only book in the New Testament that is apocalyptic is Revelation. But there were a lot of books called apocalyptic literature between the Old Testament and the New Testament period of time, and they're all very similar to Revelation. They may be from the Jewish standpoint, but they're all had basically the same terminology and so forth. So the generations before John's day, suffering went rampant under the Romans. People were being killed. People were being slaughtered for their belief. As Christians, as Jews, it didn't matter. But it had been going on for quite a long time prior to that. The Assyrians and the Persians and the Greeks before Christ came. And the Greeks are the one where we get this idea of the abomination of desolation. That comes from the Greeks. It comes from when Antiochus Epiphanes put on swine on the altar and sacrificed it. You couldn't do anything more. You couldn't do anything worse than that to the Jews. But they sacrificed. Then we have Rome. And Rome and the Domitian and and some of the Caesars, there was a killing and there was a worship of Caesar. If you didn't worship him, you were killed. There is that suffering. And there is that suffering in some places in the Middle East now. If you don't worship Allah, you're killed. But there's, back when I was growing up, who were we afraid of? You go back to the 38th chapter or along that line of Ezekiel, and you talk about the great bear, the Russians. They were the ones that stood out. Uzbekistan, all of that area right in there was Gog and so forth if you read it. That was the ones we were waiting on, the great war, the end of war that would end all wars in the Valley of Megiddo. You know, the courts today, I come to this, the courts today will appoint a mediator. If somebody is getting a divorce, they will appoint a mediator a lot of times nowadays. And that mediator will attempt to work out, maybe reconcile the situation, or get the couple to come back together and carry on with their marriage. If it doesn't, that mediator will help them to divide up the material things, or what are we going to do with the children, helping that line. The National Runaway Switchboard was started because, why? Because children that ran away had they wanted a way for them to get in contact with their parents, to smooth the way along, so that they could go back home. The prodigal son, there was no national hotline or runaway hotline when he left home. But he needed a buffer, somebody to buffer the way back home. And I wonder how many times he said to himself, I wonder, well, eventually he was going to have to say, I'm just going to have to go home. I've just got to, I don't care what happens, I don't care what the music, I'm going to have to face the music. He said, I will get up and go to my father's house, or go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired servants. And then he was not anticipating what would happen. He did not realize that his father was going to meet him and greet him. And the father said, quickly, bring the best robe and put on him, and put the ring on him, his hands and his sandals on his feet, and bring out the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate. How often do you think this boy worried about what his father was going to do when he got home? He was worried about that. It's a pity that there wasn't a hotline he could call to kind of help along the way. But there was one, and there was somebody manning it that day, and that was God Almighty. God was manning that to give him the resources and the ability, the mental capacity, and the heart to go home. There's another story, and that's Jacob. He had every reason to be afraid of going home after spending 20 years with a man that was just downright out. He was a thief in many respects. His uncle, of all people in the world, Laban. After Jacob had cheated Esau out of his birthright and taken the blessing and all of that, Jacob was worried about going home, but he was tired of living and being taken care of and being cheated by his uncle. So he decides to go home, and even though there was a lot of danger in going home, nevertheless he was going home. Because of the things he had done to Esau. His mother had said to him, and she was working as a mediator along the way, and she says actually says in 27th chapter of Genesis, now therefore my son, obey my voice, and arise and flee to Haran, to my brother Laban. Stay with him a few days, and your brother fury will subside, and your brother's anger against you will subside. So she knew that she was acting as a mediator there. Just get out, and in a few days, I'll call you to come back. Well, 20 years later, she's dead. She died soon, undoubtedly not long after that. But anyway, there was nobody to tell him. That burden that Jacob carried with him for 30 years, 20 years that is, living under his uncle's roof, made him willing to take out and just go back home. Nevertheless, he was worried about that brother Esau, because he was not thinking of, he was worried about what Esau would do. And Jacob had accumulated a great wealth. He had plenty to pay him off, in a sense. But wealth would do him little good if he's dead. So he worried about that. But Rebekah was right. Don't worry. He's going to forget about it. And he did. The only person that didn't forget about it was Jacob. He was afraid. And consequently, he began to think of, how can I placate Esau? And he rationalized, well, he might have changed his mind. That's good. I'm thinking that. But then somebody came and said, I want to tell you about Esau. He's coming with 400 men. Well, that you can imagine then he started thinking about knives and swords and all the other things, the safety, his safety and the safety of his family. Then he started thinking, well, as Jacob was, a scoundrel, a one who was always conniving and scheming, he said, well, let me think about doing this. He says, I'm going to separate my family into two groups. And if this group is taken and can't escape, this group will escape. Then he had another thought. He said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to set them up in pockets of groups. And I'm going to send the goats and the sheep along with some of the servants. And I'm going to send them along. And as they come to Esau, Esau is going to say, well, where's Jacob? And Jacob is going to, and the leader of that pack, that group, he says, he's coming along in you, but he wanted to give you these animals first. And then the next group, that scenario kept playing out, time after time after time. He was going to give him his gifts, and hopefully he would forgive him by the time he got there. But Esau was ready before he ever got there. I want to tell you, there's a big difference between the way Esau and Jacob, and the way Esau looked at Jacob, than the way the prodigal son's brother looked at him. Because the prodigal son his brother was worried about the inheritance. Esau forgot all about the inheritance. He forgot all about the blessings, but not the prodigal son's brother. There needed to be a mediator between those two. We all try to use our wits to get what we want. We've done it with God. We try to do it with people. We're all prodigal, y'all, in so many ways. Some of us have the personality of Jacob. We scheme our way through life. And some of us have the personality of Esau. We are willing to give up everything to get Coca-Cola. I'm thirsty. I've got to have that. I've got to have my thirst quenched right now. I want it right now. Some of us have that personality. Some of us have that personality where anger hangs on forever. And some of us have that short memory where we forget, like Esau did. What is needed in every case is someone who can mediate. Rebekah could have sent word to Jacob and said, you can come home, but she didn't. Isaac could have said, you can come home, but he didn't. Esau could have said, you can come home, but he didn't. He needed a mediator, somebody to step forward. We are blessed because we have a mediator that walks with us every single day of our lives. He walks, as John received the message of Revelation, while he was in a dirty, dingy smelly cell, prison cell, God chose that way to go to him by the angel. He chooses us sometimes to be the messenger. We are the angel. There are a variety of ways God reaches people. But Jeremiah 31 says, and I'm coming to a close, Jeremiah 31 says that God had already tried the covenant, the laws that were written, and now he's going to try another one in the future. He says, he talks about the new covenant which is written upon your heart. The mediator will not be out there somewhere. The mediator will be on your heart. And that's what Hebrews talks about. Hebrews 8:6 talks about that mediator that is inside of you, that new covenant, that new mediator. You won't have to ask a person, do you know the Lord? Because they will all know him. I remember talking about Eldridge Cleaver. And if you recall him, you remember he was part of the Black Panthers. Got in a lot of trouble. He grew up in Arkansas, moved to Phoenix, I think, and he ultimately ended up in Oakland, California, where he got involved with the Black Panthers. He wrote a book, Soul on Ice, and you can imagine what that was. That would have been for the underground, and it would have been a person who has lost all vitality and heat in life. He was tried, and it looked like he was going to prison, and ultimately he escaped and jumped bail and went to Algeria. He ended up in Paris and France and in Cuba and Russia. He then, and then after being in isolation for all this period, he came to know the Lord. Now listen, when I was growing up, Eldridge Cleaver was the big word, the Black Panther. Bad man. But he came to know the Lord. What did he become? He became a Republican of all things in the world. He also backed Reagan. He ran for public office. But the change took place while he was in isolation. When I say isolation, when he was in the foreign countries. And you know, he says there is no country like America. All the time he spent in all these others. He joined the church at Palo Alto, the Bible Church at Palo Alto. But what I'm trying to say to you this morning is, he heard God, and it was written on his heart. A lot of people don't respond to that. And if you read Hebrews, their hearts are hardened. If you listen to your heart, God speaks. He comes in a multitude of ways. He may come as an angel in the form of a person. He may come in the form of an angel, he's speaking to you at night, in your dreams, some other way. But he's always speaking. But the new covenant is, I've written it on your heart. Today, listen to your heart. Make a decision today. We're going to open the doors of the church for you to say, Lord, I want to listen to you a little bit closer. I want to